And I am going to, okay. So, hello, Women of AR. This is Stephanie, and we are here to do our debriefing of the 2024 USARA National Championships. And we have as our special guest the winning team, Rootstock Racing Women, who have accepted the invitation to be our new Women of AR race team for the coming year. So we're super excited about that, and we'll be really excited to see what the year brings for you and cheer you on. Thanks to all of the race organizers who have donated race credits for that. We've got a huge long list of them. I won't go through it, but we'll make sure and mention them in our post, and hopefully you all can get out and do some of those races and take advantage of that. So without further ado, I want to introduce Karen, Nikki, and Britt, the three team members. And why don't Karen, you start by telling us sort of how this team ended up coming together, if you've raced together before, and what your roles were on the team.
Yeah, so I've been racing with Nikki on Rootstock Racing. I guess since 2018, we've been doing races together on and off. And initially, we were going to send two co-ed teams to the race. And I guess the opportunity kind of presented itself to Nikki if she wanted to lead maps to have a women's team instead. And so Nikki decided to go ahead and that she was feeling really good about nabbing this year. So at that point, we needed to find a third teammate, and Abby, who is racing on Rootstock as well, but with the co-ed team, she sends Nikki and I a kind of mysterious text of, "Ooh, I have somebody that might want to race with us," and kind of held us in suspense. But the minute she started giving clues, Nikki guessed it that it was going to be Britt, and so sure enough, Britt wanted to join us, and that was pretty awesome. So yeah, I never had really race with Britt. I did get the chance to go out biking with her and Jen prior to the race. They live pretty close to me. So it was really great just to kind of meet her a little bit and see just following her lines was amazing. And I think Nikki got that experience during the race. So that kind of really increased my confidence heading into the race, getting to meet her ahead of time. For roles on the team, Nikki was navigating on foot. Britt was navigating on the bike. And yeah, I have the job.
Karen's the runner.
Yeah. Yeah, that was my job. I was a rabbit for the run portion. We let Brittany do that on the bike, but for the foot portion, that was my job.
I think Karen is also like the spirit leader, right? Nikki, I want you to tell the story. I read in the race report about the conversation she had with Garrison in that first TA because I laughed so hard at that.
Yeah, Karen is definitely a big kind of like spirit and just like bringing the stoke to the team, which I love. So yeah, very first TA, we had just finished the first trek section, well ahead of our own time estimates for that trek section. Actually, we did it really clean. We hit all the checkpoints without too much trouble. Came into TA feeling pretty good, and Garrison came over to talk to us while we were getting ready for the bike, and he's talking to Karen, and he's like, "How you guys doing?" And she goes, "We're crushing it." And he goes, "Okay, great. Where are you going next?" And I think she said something to the effect of, "To the crushing zone." And what he had meant to ask is, "Where are you going? What checkpoints are you getting?" And that just wasn't computing in Karen's mind. It was just, "We are crushing it." And so then he was like, "Okay, I'm going to go talk to one of the navigators." But it was a pretty funny exchange. And that really is a good essence of Karen on the team. She just
until 9 hours
stoke.
into biking, and then that's not Karen on the team.
Yeah, that's Karen early in the race when we're doing really well. Yeah, but generally throughout.
I think it's super smart the way you all divided up navigation duties because Britt obviously is the strongest biker on your team. So giving her the maps for the bike, and she's also an awesome navigator, kind of gives her a chance to ride just a little ahead, stop and look at the map at an intersection. And so you don't lose as much time when you've got your strongest biker who can also navigate on the bike. It's a really great time savings. And also such an awesome way to elevate your own level of riding. Karen mentioned that. And for other people who are going to watch this, the very best way, I think, to become a really good and confident mountain biker, besides attending Jen Stillman's Embodying Confidence session, which is coming up, little plug for that, is to ride on the tail of somebody who is a better mountain biker than you are. And it's such a great way to show you what you can do.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. I think that's how I got good at mountain biking, was following and riding with people who were a lot better than me. And as far as dividing up the nav, it was really a no-brainer. Britt's been racing for a long time. She was, kind of out of the sport the last couple years, focusing on biking. But for those who know Britt from back when she was racing a lot with Untamed, she's a really good navigator. And so it was a no-brainer for us to split. And I've also done that a few times with other Rootstock teammates throughout the year, kind of dividing up, okay, you're going to do bike nav and I'll do like foot and paddle. And I find that actually works really well. And it gives you a bit of a mental break to just be like, okay, you're going to take this section, I'll take the next section. It has its pros and cons. Some navigators don't like to do that because you have your heads in the maps and you don't want to like be off the maps for a while and then have to get your head back in the maps. But I've actually found that it worked really well for me, and also just gives me a little bit of a mental break for those sections where I can just hand the maps off to Britt and she can lead.
Yeah. So Britt, one of the things that I wondered about, you're such a fast and awesome mountain biker. I thought it's going to be hard for you. You've got to rein it in when you're with a team, right? You go out and race mountain bikes by yourself. You get to go all out as fast as you want, but having to rein that in to keep a team together and keep a team with you is a lot harder. And I think it's one of the reasons a lot of teams blow up is they'll have one person who's really fast on foot or really strong on bike, and they don't know how to rein it in enough and they blow their teammates up. So talk about sort of how you process that and got yourself mentally ready to now going from this mountain bike championship race that you did the week before to going and racing with a team and thinking about that whole team dynamic and getting all three of you across the finish line.
Mm-hmm. I've been spending a lot of time the last couple of years leading and running a lot of women's group rides. So that has given me a sense of like keeping a group together and also feeling out people's speeds and strengths. I'd at least gotten to ride once or twice with Karen. So having an idea of like what's going to be a long-term pace for us, you get a sense pretty quick. Like if somebody's panting, and I've been there plenty of time when I started out, like just racing with guys and they'll just run you into the ground the first, 3 to 6 hours. It's not worth it. So if people are still able to talk and the trails were, technical, we were on a lot of single track. You're not going to get to see that much trail in a lot of adventure races. So, I've got capacity, keep glancing back, make sure we're together. And the trails were they were a mess. So making sure people are safe. Like I know this trail is going to be nasty. It's not that long. We've got 3/4 of a mile. We're going to get to it. We'll hit the intersection and then we'll be on a fire road. And, it worked out well. I know Karen wasn't happy at times. She wasn't feeling well. And it's like, you've been there, like in an hour or 2 hours, you're probably going to feel great. And then somebody else isn't going to feel good. So, that being said, like we didn't stop. You're always constantly moving, especially when you get on the roads, you can just navigate on the fly. You're not needing to stop. If it's not pouring down rain, you can kind of swap maps on the move. So it was constant forward motion. That was a 9-hour bike, that first one. And,
Yeah. So talk a little bit actually, before we get, let me go ahead and do this because we'll talk about map management in a little while. I've got that in my outline. Don't let me forget. I want to ask how you all dealt with trying to keep the maps dry because, right, there was so much water and so much wet. So don't let me forget. I want to be sure and talk about how you all did that, especially since you were swapping it a lot.
Mhm.
But first, so let's talk about the flow of the race, sort of big picture stuff. What were your all's thoughts when you got the maps and saw the distances and you knew what kind of conditions were out there? Did you think that clearing the course was an option for you?
I'm happy to take this one. Yeah. So we had a hint from the night before. So they were kind enough to show us the really cool course overview schematic that Jeff O'Connor makes, which I love that they showed that to the racers because that's often something we don't get to see. And so there were some hints in there where there were some like approximate distances and time estimates. So even the night before, we're just adding up these time estimates and thinking this is probably not a clearable course. And so morning of, we get the maps, we started crunching our own time estimates, and we were pretty sure it was not clearable. And so at that point, it was really trying to do the math on where are there clusters of checkpoints that we think are going to take the most amount of time, that would make the most sense to drop. So we had a couple of different options in mind. We actually thought very seriously about dropping the first 3 bike points, which I think were 8, 9, and 10 on the snowshoe property. And part of the reason for that is we knew that those trails were going to be a mess. They were going to be single track, soaking wet, muddy. Britt had ridden there the week before. She knew those trails were going to be really messy. And we wondered that they had the potential to be really slow. And so just doing the math on those points versus some later options of points to drop, we thought those might be smart. I'll come back to it. We ended up going for them, but that was because we came out of the first track ahead of our time estimates. But other sections of points that we considered dropping, and we kind of like had these different options in mind, and it was basically as we get to each TA, we sort of reassess where we are relative to our time estimates. So on the big overnight trek, I'm trying to find the map here. The first 3 checkpoints, which I think were like, 21, 22, 23, we thought about skipping those, so that we had that as an option. And then the final option of points to drop was the last track out of TA5, which we actually thought maybe just dropping the window and getting those 2 little points that were kind of near the TA. So those were the main options that we identified as potential areas to skip, just depending on how we were doing with timing. But no, definitely from the get-go, we did not think the course was clearable, at least not for us.
Okay, so then let's sort of break it down. What you said that your time estimate coming into TA1, you were ahead of time. So talk about the race start, like mentally. Karen, why don't you talk about what you all were thinking when you line up at the race start and it's just these crazy winds. We were on top of the mountain in the wind tunnel that is Snowshoe Village Central. And I mean, the weather was insane. What were you all thinking going into this in terms of like mentally, where were you?
I'm not gonna lie, the winds were making me a little nervous. I had a friend that got hit by a tree limb and had a pretty severe, like life-altering concussion from it. And so I was like, if the winds keep up, I might be wearing my bike helmet in the woods during the trekking portion. But honestly, once we got in the woods, it really wasn't that bad. All of my races I've done this year have been in the absolute pouring down rain. So I don't know if it's me that's bringing it, or if it's just really bad luck on my end. So that part of it, I wasn't thrilled to be racing in the rain, but I kind of also feel like I'm used to it. So heading off on foot, I think I'm always like really excited. I love any trekking portion. It's definitely my forte. I think the first couple of checkpoints, the very first one we went for, we bobbled it just a little bit. It wasn't clean, and we saw all the other teams kind of running around doing the same thing. Like I noted that Bend was kind of near us and some of the other teams. But once we recovered from that one, I feel like until Nikki, you might be better at this. There was a one that we ran into Rootstock's other team a couple of times. We were kind of attacking a similar order, but like kind of from very slightly different angles. And I feel like it was the last one, Nikki, am I correct? That 6. Yeah, that one was also a little bit of a struggle too, I think, for us.
Yeah, it was a faithful gully. And we saw the Rootstock 1 team ahead of us kind of went up a different gully, and classic mistake. I was like, oh, okay, this is a good spot to go in. No, it was too soon. We figured it out though.
Yeah, so but I feel like again, there were small errors quickly recovered. I think, I certainly don't think anyone lost any spirits or like had a bad feeling for the rest of the race based on it. And like Nikki said before, we definitely finished all those foot points a lot sooner than we had ever expected to. So we were definitely in good spirits by the time we hit the first TA.
Yeah, you hit this super cleanly. Nikki, why don't you tell us what your plan was? I mean, your line from A to B, it just looks super clean, and that's one that a lot of teams had trouble with. We saw a lot of teams overshoot B. They were too high, and they ended up going pretty far back. There was a trail that continued on here. You can't see it on this one. Michelle had it drawn in, but that trail ended up being their backstop, and that's what caught them and turned them around. But you all look like you nailed this one. How did you navigate to B?
Yeah, we did really well in here, and this was really a team effort. So the line from A to B, as you can see on the topo map, there's not a lot of features to really help guide you. So what we did is I just took a bearing and had a distance estimate. So I had Brit pace counting and I had the bearing. And that's honestly A to B and B to C. It was a combination of a really tight bearing and pace counting that really, really helped us nail it. B was tricky. I think that's the one that was like at the end of an old road bed or something.
That
Right.
was
There were a couple of different faint road beds back there, but we kind of just stuck to our guns with the bearing and the pace counting and ended up finding it without too much trouble.
Yeah, Ben and I vetted that one and we came in to be somewhat high and used the high point here to sort of figure out where we were. So we didn't go too far past it, but yeah, staying on a bearing and pace count over that distance, I'm impressed. That was way further than I can keep track of counting. So good for you, Britt,
pace.
if you can keep a pace count for that long.
The pace count was tough. Like it wasn't accurate. It was like, well, I've hit my pace count. I know that it's still short because the terrain in there was tight.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you can't walk in a straight line. You can't take normal steps.
Yeah, there was a lot of climbing over down trees,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So it's approximate. And once you get past that pace count, then you're like, okay, we're in 100 meters. And Nikki's bearings were spot on, so that was allowing us to just keep tracking until we got to that point.
Yeah, awesome. So you came into TA1, you're feeling pretty good. Tell us about the decision to go ahead and go after 8, 9, 10.
Yeah, Britt, you want to take that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we were like, we're gonna base it off of the slow times and see where it goes. Cause I think that was a 3 to 5 hour estimate. So we're like, it might take us 5 hours. And it took us just over 3 hours. So we're like, okay, well, there's no reason to shed points right off the bat now because these points are pretty close together. I have a good idea of how we're going to attack this, and we went after it. And it's so funny, like just from that point, you're already at a TA where there's a bunch of teams in there, and you have no idea where you are in space. We saw Women of AR coming in as we rode out, so they were minutes behind us. And then there's co-ed teams all around. So we made the decision to basically go straight up the ski hill out of there and attack that 8, 9, and 10. And this is because it's so early in the race, it was funny to see it because it was complete chaos. There were teams everywhere, going every single direction, going up and down every single trail, walking through the woods, walking up trails, bike whacking, bushwhacking, literally everything. So it was fun to do. And we took a pretty straightforward route. We came from the high point, which I think some people came from below and rode up towards 8. So we came all the way up high, and there's an airport. It's not an airport. They call it an airport up at 8. And then instead of riding, we rode minimal single track, and we chose to hop on that fire road that split 9 and 10, and hop off bikes, grab 9, ride a little bit again, hop off bikes, grab 10, and then shoot out of there. And we had no idea like that was a great move. It kind of set us up for just we got out of the thick of things pretty quick, and then it was that long slog up to Mauer and continuing on.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of slingshotted you past a bunch of teams
Yeah.
avoiding those trails.
And you couldn't tell what was happening because there were so many choices. I didn't realize there were so many choices until you see what is actually happening on the ground. And I think our tracker was essentially blank for an hour in that space. So it didn't show what we did there until afterwards.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it sort of looked like you all had skipped those points at first, but when we were able to look at the back end tracker that has more points on it, and that's why I was posting some in the group to let people know what was going on. Yeah, so then pretty uneventful. You get up to the Mauer Basin.
I think, did we hit Mauer? Yeah, so we hit Mauer, and we did a full loop. You could have done a little out and back in there, but we had a lot of time with the maps beforehand. Like we're doing 2 rivers in a couple of weeks, and you're gonna get your maps on the clock. So it's gonna involve a lot less planning and measurement, etc. Like I did full measuring for biking because we had time to. We could roll it all out. And so we did a single loop in there and it was pretty clean. Unfortunately, I took us on one of the harder trails. It would have been a slightly easier route if I had chosen another trail. But
So do you use a Scale X to wheel out your route?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So there was time. There was plenty of time to do that for this. And then, we got the news that the paddle was canceled. So that started changing everyone's strategy at whatever time that was, 7:15 or what have you. So then you're like changing time estimates and changing cutoffs for yourself. And then we headed up to that Alpine Meadow. And for any longer bike, this was one in particular, I handed the maps off to Nikki for this because having not been on maps a lot lately, it was nice. She's really into the micro nav, so it was helpful for her to be on maps for sure on foot. She's just really been in maps and she nailed that section
Did you all do any towing at all?
for like 5 minutes. 5 minutes of the whole race, yeah.
Oh yeah, I guess we did do a little.
For about a half mile.
We did a little bit of sharing of packs,
Mhm.
but not much towing.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
pretty, yeah.
Good deal. Okay. And then you all took it, there were a couple of different routes from this point down to 20. And I think from what I've seen, looking back, and I think Michelle will support this, that this road route was probably the preferred route there. This one.
And I didn't even see it. I know that even like when you look at the tracker shows you should go this way. But when you look at a map, and if you saw any of these, how the maps are, they have these black lines. You're like, oh, this is the route. And every time you see a solid black line, you should be like, this might not be a good way to go. Because somebody drew this in with the GPS. And so that route that was by the river that looks like, oh, you're going to have a nice gravel flat ride to the TA is false.
Yes.
Twice it's false.
Yeah.
The first time you're on this gravel road and it's like, oh, this is nice. And then it dead ends in a camp. You're like, oh, there was a trail back here. And so you go straight up this. The thing is, those trails weren't in that bad of shape. They were grass and there were a few trees down, but they weren't terrible. Like you could ride them. This was where Nikki got a massive stick stuck in her wheel and we had to take it off to get it out. I don't know how you get a stick stuck in your wheel that you can't pull out, but you could not remove it.
It was impressive. I don't even know how I got in there.
And then again later on, it's just, we're back on this gravel road, and then the gravel road just disappears, and you have to cross a creek and then hike up this steep little thing, and then there's a trail there, and it was on the map.
And
Talking about the stick in the wheel. Were you all the ones who got your knife out? You all are the ones who posted the picture with your knife out.
That wasn't us.
Sawing the stick, right? Did you all see that post?
Yeah.
I did see that post. Yeah.
Yeah, it was a different report in the Women of AR group. Someone who actually took out their mandatory knife, Liz and Michelle. I don't know if you saw that. I know you all aren't on Facebook as much, so you might not have, but another team got a branch stuck in their wheel and it was so long that they couldn't just pull it out. They got their mandatory knife out and sawed the thing so that they could get it out and not snap her derailleur off, is what they were worried about.
I think I saw that post.
Yeah, that was crazy. Okay, well, so there were a lot of bike mechanicals this race, like all the way around. So, I mean, kudos just having your bikes in good shape and being able to race on them.
I was actually really worried about that, like on some of the more gnarly, like single track, just because I'm not as confident, especially with it being wet. And I was really worried if I crashed and created a mechanical, like in my mind, it was like, well, slow down a little bit so you don't do that just to get to the finish line. Because, if you do something bad to your bike, it's race ending. So
and it
I was
happened.
definitely well aware of that.
It happened to several teams early on. I mean,
yeah.
And you don't know the circumstances of it, but broken derailleur hangers, those are,
Yeah. Bad stuff. Okay, so then on to TA2, and it looks like you all must have been on your time schedule into TA2 because we can see you went for those points high up on the ridge that caused your comrades on Rootstock Racing a lot of trouble. We know we've all read Brent's report, and 21 was the downfall of their race. It looks like you all took a more conservative approach, taking it from the road, and it served you well, right?
Definitely. We just, yeah, walked that road around. It was definitely a slightly more roundabout route, but way more straightforward. And that worked out pretty nicely. We did struggle a little bit coming out of 21 because there's that road that map kind of goes north and then northeast, which we were gonna take over to the Allegheny Trail, and we didn't really find that road in the woods, so we ended up backtracking and then bushwhacking over to the Allegheny Trail, which turned out to be a really nice open wood to bushwhack through. And that's also where we saw Women of AR again, and so we're like, oh, they are right behind us.
Yeah, so how often did you run into them out in the woods? I'll pop their track up here. Yeah, you can see. Yeah, and in fact, when I looked at the when I played your all's courses on the tracker, it looked like they made up some time on you taking that other route down to TA2. So that's one of the places where they were able to catch back up. So it sounds like they caught up to you. You all were back together around 22.
Well, so we saw them, yeah, go like we were leaving 21 and they were going in. So they were close behind us. And then we saw them again leaving 24. And then down in the bogs trying to find 25, we were kind of like with them bushwhacking. And then we eventually got separated and we saw them again at 27. So to answer your original question, we saw them a lot out on the course, which was a lot of fun. They were right with us. We were leapfrogging. We could tell they were crushing it. So it was a lot of fun seeing them so often out on the course.
Yeah, fun. And now you raced with them earlier this year, right, Nikki?
I did, yeah. I love those guys. They're amazing. And yeah, it was kind of weird racing against them, having raced with them not so long ago. But we're good friends and have a good kind of camaraderie. So it was a lot of fun seeing both of our teams just like really vying at the top of the field. Was just really, really proud of both squads.
Yeah, we were too. It was awesome to watch. All right, so what about anything else remarkable in terms of decisions made up until you get to TA4? It looks like you felt like you had time to go get these three. That was obviously a pretty far out of the way to go grab those, but you were still feeling good about your time at that point.
Yeah, I think at that decision point, Britt, correct me if I'm wrong. I think we decided to go get those three and had a feeling we might end up having to drop the window on the last trek. But felt that it was worthwhile to go get those points because they were on bike. They were not too far off of gravel roads. So we figured that these 3 points would take less time to get.
Were these the three that you could get either on foot or on bike? Is that what it specified for those three?
It was bike, but you could drop your bike.
Yeah.
I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. And so then you're into TA4, and obviously the paddle had been dropped for people who didn't do the race or follow it that closely. The original intent would have been to paddle to TA5. You had this trekking loop off of TA5. Then you would have paddled to TA6 and your bikes would have been there and you would have finished on bike. But with the paddle canceled, you all basically biked to TA5. And then at this point, what was the decision process between going and getting the window JKL and these trekking points versus making it back to the top? What was your timing coming into TA5?
Yeah. Brett, do you want to take that one?
What time was it? It was like 9 a.m. when we got to TA4, right?
TA4
First
40.
walking tacos. I want to
Yep.
say like 9 a.m. So 9.
Shout out to Walking Tacos.
It's just before 9 a.m.
Like
Yep.
your little mnemonic or whatever, how you're going to remember TA4. That's the Walking Taco TA.
Dublin, yes. And so TA5, we had already decided, at least on the way there, I don't know if we decided before TA4, but on the way to TA5, we were like, we need to drop these points because there's still a lot of miles of biking left. The window there was all off trail, pretty much, I believe.
Yeah. So that trek was all off trail. Yep.
And the bike window, if you're gonna have to choose a window, the bike window was more or less very close to riding. Like you kind of have to ride by them anyway, unless you just ride straight home. So, other than that one with the overlook platform, those other two were very close, to your route.
We briefly considered getting 32 and 33 and just skipping the window of points that are off trail. But when we got into TA5, we had a time estimate for the last bike and we were kind of worried about it. So we were like, okay, we're gonna drop this whole trek. Let's go finish the bike and actually get the window of points on the last bike.
Yeah, and so we did the math before we started tonight and got on the recording, and I think I just kind of quickly estimated that your all's last bike leg was about 17 and a half miles with about 5,177 feet of elevation gain. Does that sound about right in terms of what you all had measured out or
That
wheeled out?
sounds like a lot when you hear it out loud.
So what had you all estimated was the time you would need to finish that leg?
Do you have
Britt,
it?
yeah, for some reason, 6 hours is in my mind. I think that was closer to the slow estimate, but we were thinking it would be 5 to 6 hours.
Yeah, so if you rolled into TA5 at 9 a.m., you had exactly 6 hours left. So yeah.
Yeah.
And my original map it says that we need to finish the trek by 9:30 a.m. to clear. And I think that we were at that point, or we're probably around 10 a.m. at that point.
Yeah.
So that was without starting the trek. So if we were continuing to clear, we needed to get out of there, clearing the trekking checkpoints at 9:30. So, and I think that was pretty good time management because at the end of the day, we got all those bike points. We didn't stop at all on the way home, and we had 30 minutes. So, I mean, maybe we could have gotten a checkpoint in the trekking, maybe one of them, or we could have ended up biking all the way home and not getting the 34 and 35 because we were panicking essentially.
Yeah, right. Well, and the other thing that seems like it was really smart decision to go ahead and get to the top of the mountain is once you got to the top of the mountain, at that point you have a much better idea how much time you've got left. If you've got time to go after the window or 34, 35, it seems like it would have felt like a really big gamble to be going after more points at the bottom of the mountain.
You still had to do that bike leg. And
Yeah.
I'll say this, we were in the window, we were finishing the window, and I was like going through and talked to Nikki, and I was like, we're gonna skip 34 and 35. Okay, you guys are good with that? We're gonna skip it, we're gonna play it safe. And we're riding, and we get down to where you can decide. You get to that intersection. And I was watching the time as we're going, and we had an hour and 55 minutes. And on paper, it's only like 12K or so. And I was like, we gotta go. We gotta go for these checkpoints. And I was like, guys, we're gonna do it. Karen, let's pan to you. What did you think when I said that?
Panicked. At that point, like I was just so ready. Like again, being on foot is my thing. So I was quite disappointed to have missed the foot points. Like for me, just getting off the bike and being able to be on foot for a while would have like really kind of like raised my spirits. So I was pretty bummed to miss that whole section on foot and stay on the bike. And so I was like, okay, I can do this. Like I'm one of those people when I get something in my mind, it's like, okay, I can wrap my head around it. And then when she threw the 2 more points at me, I was like, oh my gosh, what if I'm the reason why we don't finish this? And so we start riding, and pretty soon we just come to this enormous looking hill. And I seriously started to like panic that I was going to be the reason that we did not get back in time. So Britt took my pack for a bit, which helped. And then we started seeing other teams because at that point we hadn't seen any other teams. And so I was thinking like, wow, did we make a bad choice here in terms of our time? And then we started seeing other teams.
Mountain. Yeah. It felt like we were the last team who decided we were going to go up there.
Yeah. And then we started seeing, like, we saw Mark Latanzi and like, like he's an amazing navigator. So like it really brought a lot of like confidence at that point. Like, okay, we didn't make this crazy decision. There's other teams out here with us. And at that point, my mentality kind of switched to, instead of like panicking being the reason, like, what if I'm the reason we don't finish on time, to being like, what can I do to help us finish on time? So that was a good mental shift for me.
So remind me how many points was there a difference in the points on the window, the JKL window off the paddle and the MNO, or were they the same? I think they might have been the same, right?
The trekking one was 6 points.
And the one up top was 6 points, I'm pretty sure. If
they
Michelle
were the
were
same.
unmuted, she would tell us immediately.
I think they were the same, yeah.
6.
I don't have it written on my map. But
Yeah,
I'm looking at the
pull
course
the rep
book.
book up to quickly take a look at that. I meant to have all these written down before we got on here, and I got too caught up.
Yeah, they were both 6 points.
I'll pull up the root book.
I just did they were both worth 6 points.
Yeah, so down here was 6 and up here was 6. Again, we were talking about that at the race, the fact that you had this window versus this window, and if you had to choose, you're already at the top of the mountain when you do this one. So it just made sense that you're going to choose that. And like you said, it's right off the road. So yeah, I mean, that it seems like you all just played a super smart race, and you know, obviously came out well in the end for it. So let's see what else I've got next on my outline here. Oh, I wanted to talk about the maps. What did you all do to keep your maps dry and in good shape?
I'm a big proponent of just big Ziplocs. So you got a big enough Ziploc that you can fit a map. What I typically do is I will take, if they're not double-sided maps, I will double-side them. So I've got a map on each side, and I will do a separate bag for every set so that I never need to take a bag out of a Ziploc. It's always protected. That's what I typically do. For this race, we did that for the first couple maps, and then because there were so many bike maps, we actually stacked them all in a bag because those were also going to be in a bike board on the handlebars. And for Britt, that was kind of just made more sense to keep them all together. So Britt, you could talk a little bit about that.
yeah, I mean, it rained off and on until at least like 9 p.m. And then I think there may have been even some rain overnight. There was like at least one more annoying rain. So until then, I pretty much left them in the plastic bags, but I don't like doing that with the map board because it's just, I can pull maps while we're still riding as long as we're on a road if I don't have them in a bag. So once it got to the point where everything wasn't like muddy and gritty, then I just kept them folded in there, and then I can pop an edge on the map board and swap them out because the map board is waterproof. It's what you're putting under that with the wet mat case and stuff. And because we had time, we had our maps pretty well marked up, so we didn't want to like lose our highlight and stuff. If you don't have a map marked up, like these are very waterproof, so you could get away with them getting a little wet, but
Yeah, what color highlighters do you all use? I find that some highlighters are a lot better than others for staying on the map.
yeah, pink.
Plug this. Regular highlighters, no go. As soon as they get wet, they're gone. Sharpie neon. That's
Yeah.
my favorite thing. So Sharpie makes neon colors. So they've got an orange, a yellow, pink that show up great on maps. And that stays even if it gets wet. I actually got that little tip from Garrison when I raced Expedition Oregon with him a couple years ago. And I got those Sharpie neons and will not go back. They're great.
Yeah, and they really highlight your route really well because, I mean, that's all pink neon highlighter. Plus, they use red Sharpies too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We really need to get in touch with Sharpie about sponsoring that.
Yeah.
They have no idea what a dent we are in their bottom line, adventure racers. We go through a lot of Sharpies, don't we? All right. So what about any lessons that you all took from this that you'll apply to future races? Any mistakes that you made that you'd go back and do over again? It didn't look like you made many mistakes in terms of your route. So I wonder if there were any other things that you think back on and think, I would have done that differently.
I wish I had a dry pair of shoes.
Would it have helped?
Yeah.
I don't know. My feet were in pretty rough shape by the end of the race, but I'm not sure it would have helped.
So did you wear the same pair of shoes through the whole race on the bike, or did you
Yeah.
have bike shoes?
Oh, I had bike shoes. Yeah, bike shoes and trekking shoes, but just the nature of the way that this course was laid out, a lot of times you'll have access to a gear bin or a paddle bag where you have the opportunity to change your shoes, and we didn't really have that in this race. So it was kind of just an exercise in being soaking wet the whole race,
Mhm.
which, you just have to take care of yourself. And I think we did a pretty good job of that. Like no one had any major chafing issues or blisters or anything crazy.
Did you all wear bike shoes? Were
Yep.
you all clipped in? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. It's become so popular these days to wear, to have platform pedals and just wear a single
Mhm.
pair of shoes, but you at least get a little bit of a break if you've got a different pair.
Yeah. Well, and
Yeah,
Nikki was
and
enjoying her bike shoes more because we didn't ever change shoes, even if we hiked for like a couple of miles like that. Into going into sunset on the first bike leg, that whole trekking section, we wore bike shoes. So we were carrying shoes the whole time. But yeah, if you got fairly comfortable trekking bike shoes, yeah, I don't know. I still can't trade off the efficiency for bike shoes.
Yeah.
To just take the weight off.
Yeah. I love being clipped in, whether I'm going uphill or downhill, just being clipped in. I
Mhm.
find it,
same.
yeah, a lot better. So what do you feel like you really nailed in this race that you're going to take forward in this next year? It sounds like switching off the maps worked well for you.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think strategy overall went really well. I think Britt and I worked well together trading off maps and that worked super well for us. In giving both of us a chance to have a little bit of a mental break and also just being on our game when each of us respectively was really on the maps. Yeah, I don't know. We had a lot of fun out there.
And I've never raced with these guys before, so to be able to show up and gel really well without being comfortable with the people you're with was pretty cool because I've definitely done it both ways where you haven't raced with somebody and it's a train wreck. And now I have a team. Like now we're a team. And we'll get to bring some other women in to race with us next year. And I'm sure I'll do some stuff with Rootstock as well. So that's really cool. But I've done, as far as maps are concerned, I've done that handoff before when I raced with Untamed. I would do that. I've done it I think maybe I did both of the last two nationals I did where I did the bike and someone else did foot and paddle. It's nice if you've got multiple navigators. And then it's to an extent too, if you have multiple navigators, then they don't feel like they need to be in the maps, right? You don't have, and I don't want to look over your shoulder if you have the maps. Like if you're like, hey, let's confer about this or let's think about this for a minute, then sure, but I don't want to be taking your map. Like you're in it and I give that to you and then it worked well.
So what have you all figured out your I'm sure not your whole calendar yet for 2025, but have you got some races planned coming up, or what are you looking at?
In
What are you
progress.
guys looking at? What are you guys looking at?
Fair enough.
Yeah. We got a spreadsheet that we're working on filling out. It's kind of far out to schedule this far ahead. But there's lots of awesome races that are that we have entries to as part of Women of AR, which is amazing. It's a really awesome, prize package that you guys put together with all the sponsors. So really excited to go try out some new races, even from some different race organizers that we maybe haven't done before. So yeah, in progress, the schedule for next year. But definitely we'll be out there racing a lot, which will be fun.
Yeah, cool, good. That's the important thing. Liz and Michelle, I wonder if you all have any questions for them or any observations, things that you've thought about since the race.
No, she's off duty now, so I'm in my office.
I'll give you some statistics because as I was looking at those, I was really interested with the stuff popped in Caltopo. You can see what total elevation was for teams and total distance.
Oh,
So I just pulled the top 10 teams that were available because I wanted to see what their mileage was and their elevation gain, their total elevation gain. So if you look at Wadali, the only team that cleared the course, they cover, and I just rounded these up, 97 miles, 23,330 feet of elevation, compared to you all did 93 miles, 20,354 feet of elevation, which was pretty good on the, on the low side for the elevation gain. So in terms of,
interesting.
your route choices, that's telling us that you all made some pretty smart, route choices relative to some of the other teams. So yeah, I thought this was a really interesting, especially to compare total mileage and elevation to people's placement in the race. Kind of gives you an idea in terms of efficiency of route. It was like if you look at Rev3 Pro Team, they covered 22,770 versus 20,354. And now they got a few more points, but not a whole lot more really. The only thing they did that you all didn't do was some of those points off of TA5. I think they got two of the points. I think they didn't do the window and they got the 2 trekking points was all. So, I think it says a lot about some smart decisions you all made in terms of your route choice and that sort of thing. So I thought that was kind of an interesting thing to do. And anybody who's interested in looking at that, the link that Mark Harris with the Adventure Enablers gave us to the Caltopo, all of the routes laid on Caltopo, you can go in and find all of those. I just did that for the top 10 because I was kind of curious to see what that looked like. So yeah, and big thanks to Mark Harris for putting that information out there because we got a much better idea of your all's actual tracks, being able to see it on there and having all of that extra detail, the profile and all of that is super interesting. And yeah, the elevation just it's pretty staggering when you look at those numbers. So kudos to you all for going out there and yeah, doing great things, amazing things. So we've got just a few more minutes. I'm curious to know then about your training on the bike leading up to this. So Karen, why don't you talk? Because I know that that's not, not your strongest discipline. I'm curious how you trained up for feeling like and going out and executing that amount of climbing on the mountain bike. I know a lot of women were pretty intimidated by it, and you obviously did a great job.
Well, funny enough, I actually like to climb. Like that is actually like my forte on the biking is climbing versus like technical, particularly when it's wet, and downhill is like what I'm more intimidated by. But I'm pretty lucky. I have Patapsco State Park near me, which has, a ton of trails, and it weaves in and out. We have this town called Ellicott City, and it weaves in and out of some really great road climbs as well as some single track climbs. So whenever I'm doing a race, I kind of load up myself. I always ride with a pack, get used to having the weight on my back. And I try and do a mix of like some single track going up the steep road climbs and kind of doing an all-terrain ride where I'm trying to hit some gravel, some road, some single track, and just kind of try and mimic what I think will kind of be out there. And that seems to work pretty well for me.
So what do you have like a goal mileage? A lot of women want like super specific, how many hours a week, how many miles a week? Do you have like just when you're in your main training phase getting ready for a race, do you have like a goal for mileage in a given week?
It depends on, so I try and ride 2 to 3 times a week, and I try and alternate doing a bigger week on foot and then doing a bigger week on bike. And sometimes that doesn't happen based on my schedule because biking just takes a little bit more time than being on foot. But I try and do one long ride a week that is getting up to about 30 to 40 of those shared miles. Now that's not road biking or gravel biking. On those bikes, I'll do a little bit more. But I try and make my max ride like around a 30, 35 mile ride before a 24-hour race usually is what I look for. And this time my ride that was supposed to be that, my bike actually broke on my last, like we had like an hour and a half left. But we were luckily near a shop, so I could bring it back. But yeah, that's usually what I aim for. I probably should train more on the bike. It's just hard with work and I don't know, hours of daylight and all that kind of stuff.
You won't get any judgment from me. That's for sure. So Britt, I'm curious, for women who want to up their technical skills, what advice would you have for them for the best way to become a better technical rider?
I think finding groups, if there's groups around you that you can ride with, it's really great. And we've been doing a lot of women's and WTFMB rides near us, which I live right by Karen. So that's nice to like have that supportive environment. Also just riding with people faster than you once you get comfortable. Like if you're able to ride as you start increasing your speed in the trails, like that changes. You just start leveling up. And then as you progress, like start in the easier trails and you start getting into some rockier stuff. I find when you go and ride a new place, it changes your perspective too, as far as like you ride your own trails a lot and you go somewhere else and it changes your perspective of what's challenging. Um, that's a good way. But I think really if you can find some groups that are willing to ride with you, or just get a couple of buddies, I think that you improve a lot faster when you're riding with somebody else, especially, and it's the safety aspect is huge. Like there are places I will never ride by myself because if you get hurt, you don't have cell service, etc. Like it's just like adventure racing. You'd rather have a problem with other people than by yourself, and you can't get yourself out. So, yeah, that being said, I didn't train at all on foot coming into this. I did start trekking and I was doing heavy pack trekking for like the last 6 weeks or so. I had had a pretty big bike season, so I was not on foot. I could not walk for like 3 days after this race, so I would not suggest not running, but I did run a lot. We were on foot well over 30 miles, and I would say we ran more than 10 miles. No problem. But my one piece of like gear advice is carry one trekking pole. Karen is now a believer, especially like where we were, like you're like going down little boulders and stuff in the dark, and just having that extra leg essentially is such a great stability thing. You still have a hand to eat or hold a map or fiddle with gear, but you have another hand that is just taking pressure off your knees and your legs and keeps you from tripping. Because I don't know how many times did we fall down? Like a lot.
Wow.
Nikki
Yeah.
fell down a few more times, but she's also looking at a map and walking through that stuff.
I am known for my clumsiness when I'm looking at the map and face planting.
Yeah.
One
So-
trekking pole I think makes such a huge difference. And especially if you've got creek crossings like you all had. I mean, where did you all, we've seen the pictures of different teams crossing this creek, and we see some people are like at their knees and some people are like way up here. It's like at their boobs. Where did you all find to cross? How deep was it?
It was less than waist deep, right? It was between knee and crotch deep.
It was like mid-thigh. Yeah.
I'm a little shorter, so for me, I think I had to pick up my pack a little, so my bottom of my pack didn't get wet.
Yeah. But there were teams around us. I don't know. We were converging on like everybody was heading towards the TA. So there were a bunch of there were several men's teams around us, and I'm like, well, we'll just watch where they go across, and we just followed them, and it was a good line.
Mm-hmm.
Good deal. Sarah Dahlman and I used to have a rule. This was back when I weighed a lot less than I do now, that if one of us already had dry feet and we got to a creek crossing and the other one already had wet feet, we would piggyback ride so that at least one of us would keep dry feet. So, I mean, surely one of you could have like piggybacked the other two across, right?
That'll get my Jen to do more races now. She heard that, so thank you.
Now you know, Jen.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Well, that's our 1 hour, and it's been great getting to hear your all's recounting and how things went for you at nationals. Congratulations again on an amazing performance, and your place overall in this race is just really inspiring. I know a lot of women are looking up to you, and you've got a target on your backs now for next year. So, and that's a good thing, right? I love it when I find out that, you know, somebody 3 years they've been trying to beat me at orienteering and they beat me, and they come tell me that, and I'm like, I think that's fantastic to know that I'm your goal, and congratulations for reaching it. So that's what you all will get to enjoy this next year. So thanks again for your time tonight. Liz and Michelle, thank you for putting on this awesome course and sitting in tonight. And I think we'll call it a wrap.
Thank you guys so much.